Simi Island. Under the towering cliff, dark sea waters were being roused by the surrounding waves as they churned about considerably. On crazy Captain Connor's Victor's ship named the Cinglide Skull, a few pirates donned cloaks as they pulled out their hats. The rain pattered down heavily on them as they fought against winds that could lift a child, in order to walk out the cabin and inspect the ship to prevent any accidents from happening. Their cloaks were made of linen, but their surfaces were smeared with an already hardened sticky liquid. The raindrops were unable to permeate through that layer and could only flow down onto the deck. The liquid was Donningsman tree sap, produced from the southern continent's rainforest. It was naturally water-resistant and was quite commonly seen. It was originally rather cheap, but after a research team last year suspected that it had beneficial effects on hair growth, its price skyrocketed. In such weather it's suitable to be inside the Red Theatre, drinking liquor, smoking weed, and having women in your arms. A pirate looked out of the shipboard and grumbled. His companion echoed him as he pulled out his cloak's hood. I heard there's a bunch of new arrivals at the Red Theatre. I really want to give them a try. How did you learn of that? Another pirate asked in passing. He was met with a chuckle. I heard it from the boss. It's not like you have no idea what captain's business is. That's why the boss knows plenty of human traffickers. Ha! They prefer to be called slave merchants. Speaking of which, I recall what happened that time. The pirate who spoke at the beginning wore a reminiscent look. Among the goods sent over, there was a young noble lady who had fled from her home. Her skin, figure, looks, TSK, were where I have no idea how to describe it. I still remember her to this day. What a pity that she committed suicide. As they spoke, they suddenly felt their vision brighten as they subconsciously looked up into the sky. Apart from the pattering rain, there was an abnormal silver bolt of lightning that was snaking its way through the dark clouds that hid the crimson moon and stars. Suddenly, a gigantic bolt of lightning that illuminated the surrounding waters smote down, heading straight for the Cinglide Skull. Boom! The bolts began to spread out randomly as the wooden ship burst into flames. Deafening thunder echoed in the pirates' ears. Right on the heels of that, silver bolts of lightning struck down like they were brandishing their claws. The tiny sailboat was instantly plunged into a lightning forest. At that moment, the thick lightning bolts that were about to interweave together had suddenly separated. They split apart in violation of the natural laws, and they failed to hit the Cinglide Skull. They hung close to the ship's surroundings before striking the pitch-black water, lighting up the surrounding sea as sizzling lightning bolts snaked out in a spectacle. The pirates on the deck suffered from the strike. One of them had been charred black like an overburnt piece of wood. Two collapsed as their bodies convulsed. There really is a problem. Above the grey fog, Klein couldn't help but sigh when he saw the scene of his lightning storm being dispelled. He was certain that this was a power at the level of a demigod. If he had rashly infiltrated the Cinglide Skull, even with creeping hunger, death knell, and Grassel's travels, there was no way he could put up an effective resistance against such strange powers. And by then, he wouldn't have the time to pray to himself and respond using the sea god scepter above the grey fog. Taking a deep breath, Klein made all the blue gems on the tip of the white bone scepter light up. Around the Cinglide Skull, there were two kinds of sounds in the storm. One was piercingly sharp, as though it could prick through one's eardrums and penetrate one's brain. The other was deep, sounding like a beating heart as it struck on one's spirit body. This gave the pirates an extremely uncomfortable experience, with many having the urge to vomit blood. However, this was only the beginning. The sound of splashing water intensified as a dark wave surged up to a height of nearly 10 meters, running opposite the island's cliffside. The wave was like a wall created by a deity as he pushed it toward the Cinglide Skull with an invisible hand. This was a tsunami that Klein created. It could already be considered a calamity. The whooshing sound of the wave sounded like explosions as the pirates on board looked at the dark sky outside, the churning clouds, and the massive tsunami. It felt like the apocalypse mentioned in mythical legends had arrived. They lost all will to save themselves. But as they were waiting in despair for the final judgment, a disturbance that didn't abide by logic or scientific laws appeared in the middle of the waves created by the tsunami. An indescribable vortex rapidly took form as it tore through the entire wave, causing the terrifying waves to rapidly collapse as a result. Amidst a rapturous rumble, a secondary wave threw the Cinglide Skull up high into the air as the gigantic wave from before dispersed, spraying a portion of its load onto the ship. One of the masts broke, and the ship was in shambles. Even the deck was completely flooded. Whoosh! A strong wind suddenly stirred and swept up the pirates, turning into a hurricane that exceeded its own limits, pushing the airborne Cinglide Skull further towards the sea. The ship began to ride the squall as it flew across the sky, covering a distance of several nautical miles without landing in the undulating waters. It was as though it was an airship that continued stubbornly proceeding forward. Klein was amazed at the demigod or sealed artifact of the corresponding level inside the Cinglide Skull for nullifying the tsunami. He sighed out his lacking sequence, as he couldn't create the destructive tsunami that Corvetchu had previously created, despite stirring the powers of the mysterious space above the grey fog. In the meantime, he controlled the hurricane and ensured that the Cinglide Skull didn't lose its support and plummet, afraid that it would leave his 5 nautical mile range of influence. At that moment, his goal wasn't to destroy the Cinglide Skull, nor was it to capture crazy Captain Connor's Vicar, but to force out the demigod or sealed artifact hidden inside the ship. A powerhouse or item at this level was scarce in the world. By seeing their appearance, he would know who they were sooner or later, as well as which organization they belonged to. And this provided the subsequent direction for the investigation regarding the Great Smog of Backland. I hope it's not from the Seer pathway. Otherwise, who knows if it's his true face or not. However, this is also a good thing. Since I'm investigating the truth of the Great Smog, I'll figure out what Int Zangwill is doing, and I'll make preparations for my subsequent revenge. I'll also be able to successfully find the Bizarro sorcerer potion formula and main ingredients as Klein silently sighed. He made a gem on the tip of the sea god scepter emit a pure azurite. With a hum, the Cinglide Skull's flight experienced a change. It plummeted like a roar and didn't even manage to glide. Suddenly, it turned very, very light, landing on the sea's surface like a feather caressing a human's face. At that moment, Klein, who had exhausted plenty of spirituality, was just about to muster his remaining strength to create another tsunami when he heard an explosive boom from the sea. It was a terrifying sonic boom. Furthermore, it was different from normal sonic booms, as though it was mixed with the howling sounds of the wind. It was from Sea King Jin-Galtman. Although he was still a distance away, he wielded mastery of these waters, so he could exert his influence across space while he rushed over. This was a Sequence 3 saint who was close to that of an angel. The terrifying sonic boom sent the Cinglide Skull flying out. There was no hesitation on whether it would harm anyone. After all, there was nothing wrong with striking down on pirates. Meanwhile, Klein felt a psyche that was so potent that it was terrifying as it swept across the area in search of any spots that appeared abnormal. It caused the scene before his eyes to be affected as everything turned indistinct. After resisting another blast, Klein calmly and rationally ended the response. He shut down the corresponding prayer scene before throwing the sea god scepter into the junk pile. The gap isn't anything trivial. If Sea King didn't appear, I wouldn't have the confidence in forcing out that demigod. My sequence is still too low, giving me troubles when using the scepter, as it's overly burdensome. However, at sea, the storm pathway is really powerful. They're practically mobile calamities. The powers displayed by that demigod had the key elements of distortion, confusion, loaning, and violation of normality. It appears to be the Black Emperor paths of the divine. Others might not realize it, but I have the corresponding card of blasphemy. It definitely isn't only a sequence 5 mentor of confusion account of the fallen. The military has a portion of the potion formula for the Black Emperor pathway, but it seems to be limited to the first 5 sequences. They lack sequences 4 and above. Although Klein failed to force the demigod or corresponding sealed artifact out, he had gained a certain number of clues from their reaction. He suspected that a particular faction in the royal family wasn't only cooperating with the Demoness sect and Int Zangwil, but it was also secretly in cahoots with the faction that wielded most of the sequences of the Black Emperor pathway. The descendants of Solomon or Transoist. Is King of the 5 Seas Mast involved in this? Klein was in serious thought when he heard overlapping prayers in his ear. It broke his train of thought as he instinctively emanated his spirituality and touched the rippling light beside his chair. Then, he saw Lenitz. This well-known pirate had his eyes closed as he piously prayed to the fool. Klein took out his pocket watch in a daze and took a few looks at the time to confirm that it was almost 3 in the morning. Is he nuts? Why is he praying in the middle of the night? Does he not want me to sleep? Klein watched carefully in exasperated amusement and discovered that the Nitz looked tipsy. There was even faint singing echoing outside. The crew members of the Golden Dream are having another bonfire party. Are they celebrating the departure of Gem Sparrow? To think they celebrated all the way into the middle of the night. Klein instantly understood why Nitz was praying at that moment. He took a deep breath as he emanated his will into the halo, saying in a deep voice, "Those who say my name are on my mind." Sea King Jin-Galtiman arrived at Simim Island as he began searching for the abnormal tsunami that had happened here, as well as the ship that belonged to an unknown pirate crew. He was certain that there was a demigod on board that ship. This tall and brawny cardinal of the Church of Storms with thick, dark blue hair, a high-ranking deacon of the mandated Punisher, clenched his fists as the dark clouds in the sky cracked open, sending crimson sunlight scattering across the sea. After identifying the positions of the stars, Jin-Galtiman flew in a particular direction. Suddenly, his speed slowed down because he saw a pirate's ship with a flag fluttering with the Singlide skull emblem. The ship wasn't manned by anyone as it drifted in the wind. Scarlet flames were everywhere on it, along with charred corpses. In the middle of one of the masts, a middle-aged man was tied to it. He wore a triangular hat and a black eye patch. His exposed eye was widened and filled with horror. A wooden pole had impaled him in his chest as blood dyed everything. His life and spirit body had completely dissipated. Situated beyond the storm, the Golden Dream had crimson-red moonlight shine through the thin clouds and onto one of its rooms which was dark and unlit. Nitz was standing beside his bed, motionless. It was as though he had encountered the beyond, a powers resembling Medusa's petrifying gaze. He couldn't help but grind his teeth loudly as his feet indiscernibly trembled. An endless greyish-white fog and an indistinct figure that stood high above everything, saying your inspiring words, "Those who say my name are on my mind," filled his mind. There really was a response, there really was a response. Nitz's lips quivered as he muttered silently to himself. He felt that his calves had gone soft. This was the first time he was receiving a response from the prayer. He was frightened out of his wits. He long knew that the fool was an unknown existence, the figure whom the secret organization backing Gem Sparrow believed in, and that he had already made a connection due to chanting his honorific name. If he had any actions of disloyalty or betrayal, he would immediately die a baffling death, but this knowledge stemmed from a knowledge Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwin had taught him. He had never encountered similar situations before, and he had never imagined that an unknown existence would respond to him. When the fog, figure, and voice suddenly appeared before his eyes and ears, he learned for the first time that mighty existences would directly respond to their believers. Yes, deep down, Nitz had unknowingly changed the unknown existence into a mighty existence. Just as he recovered from his shock, he hurriedly took a few deep breaths as he attempted to pace about to relieve the remnant horrors in his heart. However, just as he took a stride with his right foot, he discovered that his legs had gone limp. All he could do was collapse onto his bed before barely managing to turn around to sit up. It really is a magnificent existence. It's real, Nitz muttered softly as he came to a clear realization that he had involved himself in something serious. Back in the book world, as he had only chanted the honorific name without discovering any abnormalities, all he felt was fear having known of the possible outcomes. Now, he was facing a hidden danger that finally outlined itself, as well a future he couldn't see clearly. How could he not plunge into an inescapable pit of extreme fear? After an unknown period of time, Nitz exhaled as he consoled himself. It might not be a bad thing. At the very least, Gem Sparrow is still living, and he's leading quite a good life. Upon having this thought, he forced a smile. I'm a member of a secret organization, and in the future, a person blessed by a magnificent existence. As his thoughts raced, Nitz decided to pray every morning when he woke up. He believed that no existence would dislike a pious believer. Of course, he would keep in mind the revelation and often pray inwardly. The next morning, Klein woke up normally, having exhausted himself the previous night. He slowly got out of bed and saw that the skies were blue and the ground outside was wet. The entire world seemed to be cleansed by water, making it abnormally fresh. However, the disorderly leaves, broken branches, and all sorts of trash were an indication that it wasn't a peaceful night. After washing up, Klein wore an ordinary low in his face, ordered a cup of gunny sap, something that originated from Simim Island, and a rather heavy choice for breakfast, theativa, to make up for his previous night's expenditure. As he drank the beverage that resembled lemonade with sugar and milk, he ate the fresh, fragrant meal that mixed mutton and fish together, along with the sweet and slightly sour flavor of the fruit. Klein held up the newspapers provided by the inn with great pleasure as he read through the papers, starting with the Sonia Morning Post and News Report. At the end of breakfast, he flipped open Strange Cases, a paper that was rather popular among adventurers, and he saw a striking article headline: Bloody infighting amidst storm. According to sources, there was intense infighting on Crazy Captain Connor's Victus Singlide Skull. The pirates executed Crazy Captain and killed each other, and reports say that no one survived. All of this evil was concealed by the terrifying storm last night. No one was aware of the conflict until the Singlide Skull was found drifting around Simim Harbor. The article attached an unclear photo, seemingly captured from the harbor in secret. The photo's Singlide Skull's characteristics stood out at once. It was heavily damaged and many spots were charred black. Only a single mast remained intact, while the middle mast had a figure with a triangular hat pinned to it. It's Connor's Victus. He died just like that. Klein's pupils constricted as he seriously contemplated. It can almost be confirmed that there was a demigod on the ship last night when he saw that Crazy Captain was targeted, or with Sea King in pursuit, he could only care for himself. Unable to bring Connors with him, he decisively silenced him and destroyed all evidence. Klein, who had plans on continuing his pursuits of Crazy Captain, felt dejected. He realized that although the trail clues hadn't been completely cut off, there was little of it left. The only matter he was aware of at that moment was that the demigod likely belonged to the Black Emperor pathway. From the intensity of the storm last night, the Singlide Skull was likely sent to the harbour by Sea King Jin Gautman so as to do any follow-up investigations. I wonder if they will have any additional findings. Yes, I can get Mr. Hanged Man to keep an eye out for it in the Church of Storms. There's no need to inform him since the tarot gathering will be this afternoon. The world can directly commission him to do so. Klein quickly made up his mind before downing the rest of the gunny sap. Then, he returned to his room and planned to retrieve the radio transceiver which he had placed above the grey fog for an extended period of time to contact Rhodes. He wanted to see if it had any other clues regarding the Bizarro Sorcerer Potion formula. Having left Auravi's East Sea, which was also where the Aurora Order's demigod had previously targeted him, Klein now dared to use items with the Grey Fog's aura. However, he knew very well that he couldn't do it frequently, and each use couldn't be for too long, otherwise, there was the possibility of the true creator detecting it. Due to this reason and his wariness against Rhodes, he planned on doing whatever he could do himself, and he would seek advice from others if possible. He only planned on playing the question and answer game if he was out of options. In the Blue Avenger, which was docked at the Resistance's private harbour, Alger planned on getting one last resupply before his return to Paju Island. After instructing his crew which items to purchase, he changed into local clothing, and he went straight for Bayan. After circling a few times, he came to the Cathedral of Waves, planning on reporting to Diocese Bishop Kogo about recent developments. Although he was returning to Paju Island and reporting his work to the upper echelons of the church, he knew very well who his immediate superior was. He knew that he needed to act appropriately and not make his superior believe that he was skipping the chain of command by directly establishing relations with the upper echelons. Kogo remained hale and hearty as he was very pleased with Alger's proactive reporting. After he heard that, he said with a brisk tone, "There's no need to worry about it. It's just routine reporting. I've already informed His Eminence Scoutman that you're devoted to the Lord and are loyal to the church. You're one of the most trusted captains, and His Eminence Scoutman will inform the Council of Cardinals of this." He paused, but without giving Alger any time to speak, he continued, "In addition, there's another mission. Investigate people who are intimately tied to crazy Captain Connors Vita. This is a mission directly issued by His Eminence Scoutman. You have to take it seriously. Investigate people related to crazy Captain." Alger was puzzled, but he didn't question it. Instead, he struck his right fist on his left breast and said, "Yes, Your Excellency." The grizzled Kogo nodded and thought for 2 seconds before asking, "Do you know Gemon Sparrow?" This question sounded like a bolt out of the blue. It left Alger's pupils constricting as he nearly lost control on the spot. Thankfully, he was mentally strong, allowing him to barely maintain his normal state. "I've heard of him. He's been very famous recently. Not only has he hunted Ormtown Merthyr and seriously injured Tracy, but he has also boarded Catclear's future." Alger droned on to hide the stirrings in his heart. Kogo made a terse acknowledgement. "You were at sea, so you're a little behind on the news. Gemon Sparrow killed Kishays at Tuscata last week and obtained his bounty. Hair, the pirate was indeed a devil, a Sequence 5 devil. Kishays, Agalito's second mate," Alger asked with very honest emotions. He knew that Kishays was suspected to be a Sequence 5, but he didn't know that he was of the devil pathway. And the fact he was both a Sequence 5 and a devil meant plenty of things. It meant that he was difficult to kill, which meant that Gemon Sparrow had very likely killed Kishays during a sudden encounter. This meant that Gemon Sparrow was already at the pinnacle of Sequence 5 seconds. If it wasn't because he was seeking to purchase the Sequence 4 potion formula, I might even suspect that he had become a demigod, Alger thought, feeling perturbed. He was alarmed to realize that in a week, the world had obtained the Sequence 5 Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient, killed a Sequence 5 devil, and might very possibly have a Sequence 6 Notary potion formula in hand as well. How did he do it? Alger realized that he was feeling a little frightened of the world. Of course, it wasn't something unacceptable for him. This was because he knew that the world was Mr. Fool's blessed representative. And Mr. Fool's blessed clearly wasn't a single person. If one was responsible for the Notary potion formula, while another was responsible for the Ocean Songster, then it was possible that Gemon Sparrow had only killed Kishays. Although this similarly left one apprehensive, it didn't seem like a fabricated story. Kogo nodded solemnly. "Yes, Agalito's lack of reaction implies something. Focus on gathering information about Gemon Sparrow." "All right, Your Excellency." Alger bowed reverently, having already decided to be perfunctory with the mission as much as he could. Inside the inn, Klein placed the radio transceiver on the table. Before long, rushed clacking sounds were heard. Amidst the clacking sounds, the radio transceiver spewed out new illusory paper. On the paper were words composed of Loanese, "Great Master, your loyal and humble servant, Rhodes, has finally caught up to you." There's no need to be so excited though, the way Rhodes speaks is as professional as always. He didn't express his bitterness about not being able to contact me for prolonged periods of time, nor did he question me about why I haven't been looking for it. It directly blamed itself by claiming that it hadn't caught up to me. It makes me feel a little guilty. But, I still need to be wary. Klein was momentarily at a loss for an answer. Rhodes didn't wait as it used the radio transceiver to produce an emoticon of carefully peeking out on the illusory paper. "Great Master, the ruler above the spirit world, your servant has sensed that you are one step closer to returning to your holy throne, am I right?" This fellow has evolved really quickly. He's already using colored text to form an acid form of emoticons from Rhodes' point of view. I'm a true god taking steps to find myself. That's why, although it can clearly sense that I'm only a Sequence 5, it still treats me with respect and is even more humble. Klein understood that the mirror was deliberately asking a question, so he nodded in a frank manner. "Yes, you have already answered my question. As an exchange and the rule that I need to overlook, you can raise a question to me." Rhodes typed quickly in response before adding a smiley face. Klein didn't hesitate and asked directly, "Where can the potion formula for Bizarro Sorcerer be found?" The illusory paper spat out a long paragraph of complicated symbols before turning into a mirror as it represented a realistic scene. It was a dark cathedral without any natural light source. Inside it was a bunch of squirming things that were also blurry. It looked as though it was a pencil drawing that had been wiped by an eraser, preventing any exact details to be seen. However, Rhodes added a bunch of text at the bottom of the scene. "This is Zeratal. In his advancement to Sequence 1, Attendant of Mysteries, he lost control and became a monster. However, Great Master, you have to be careful. He is a very crafty person. Perhaps everything about him is just an act with a purpose. I'm unable to look at him directly, as it will bring me harm. Aside from him, you will be unable to obtain the potion formula from any demigod from the Secret Order. This is because back then Zeratal would directly provide the high sequence potion to them. And there's almost no way to use any beyond the methods to reverse divine it." What a detailed answer, and it even gave me the additional knowledge that the Sequence 1 corresponding to the seer pathway is Attendant of Mysteries. Does it mean being an angel that serves upon mystery? From the looks of it, the secret order approach can only work by directly facing Zeratal to obtain the potion formula. And I'm not even capable of viewing him directly. It's no wonder the Snake of Fate Widow Septon told me to find the crazy Zeratal without mentioning the secret order. Klein was moved by Arrows' attitude. If he didn't feel that he lacked the level and strength to commandeer this sealed artifact, he even planned on truly treating it as his servant. Amidst the clear clicking sounds, another segment of the illusory piece of paper appeared, presenting another scene. It was a towering mountain peak. On it was a swath of dilapidated palaces. Inside it was a gigantic stone chair. Klein was very familiar with this scene. Without Arrows' footnote, he knew what it represented. The Antigonus family's treasure hidden at the main peak of the Hornus Ice Mountain range. White paper continued being spat out as a new scene was presented. Just like a movie, it had changes in the camera angle. The first scene that appeared in Klein's eyes was a lofty Gothic-style bell tower and beautiful palaces around it. The former represented the Bell of Order, and the latter represented the Sodella Palace. They were landmark buildings in Bagland. The scene changed, and soon, there was a new building on the paper. It was a pure black cathedral with two symmetrical bell towers. The scene of the cathedral's interior grew larger, and soon, it presented the entirety of the interior. It was then fixed at a pair of iron black doors that swung open. The door was abnormally heavy, and on it were 7 dark sacred emblems, as though they were guards of the tenebrous heaven. Canishgate St. Samuel Cathedral. Klein recognized the familiarly styled door. Based on the architectural style, he confirmed that the cathedral was the church of the Ebonite goddess's headquarters of the Backland Diocese, St. Samuel Cathedral. White paper was spat out and the scene changed as it plunged deep into the darkness. On an empty bookshelf built from bones, there sat an ancient notebook. It was a black hard-covered book. Klein recognized the notebook at once. It was the Antigonus family's notebook which had caused the death of the original Klein. After going around and round, everything came back full circle. Klein silently observed it for a moment, and after the scenes disappeared did he regain control of his thought processes. Yes, back then, the members of the Aurora Order were able to see the clown potion formula from a notebook. Having been acknowledged by it, the content presented to me will definitely be completely different from before when I flipped through it. It should have the arcane sorcerer potion formula. It just lacks the ingredients or characteristics. So this notebook has been sealed behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Canishgate all this time. To get it from there, the difficulty in doing so wouldn't be lower than finding Zeratal and facing him directly back then. There were high-sequence beyonders involved in the Great Smog of Backland. After I reported the matter to the Backland Diocese's church through Miss Justice, the matter was quickly quelled. This is sufficient enough to prove that the Backland Diocese has plenty of power. They have no lack of demigods or sealed artifacts. Yes, regardless, I'll need to return to Backland first and see if there are any opportunities. In contrast, I'd prefer not to head to the Hornus Ice Mountain range. Reining in his thoughts, Klein looked at the radio transceiver which had turned dark and solemn. Last night, who was the demigod on crazy Captain Connor's Victor's ship? Clacking sounds quickly sounded as the illusory paper from before vanished as new ones were spat out. The content on the piece of paper was likewise a realistic scene. On an exquisite brass chandelier, 5 candles of different heights spread their warmth and light. A middle-aged man wearing a triangular hat and black eye patch stood before a cabinet that stored grape wine, champagne, and tequila. He was humbly looking opposite him. Opposite him was a tall figure in a black cloak. Its face was completely hidden beneath the hood. The figure didn't seem to have a real head, only a blob of heavily distorted darkness that was embedded above the neck. Thanks to the portraits from bounty notices, Klein recognized the one-eyed man to be crazy Captain Connors. His disheveled and oily hair cascaded down and happened to cover his neck. Opposite him is likely the demigod. But he deliberately disguised himself and did the corresponding anti-divination preparations. For Arrows to be able to produce a scene of this level is already impressive enough. Klein wasn't too disappointed. Instead, he carefully memorized the figure's build. More than 1.85 meters tall, but less than 1.9 meters rather long arms, and when hanging his hands down, it almost reaches the knees. The broad shoulders prop up the cloak. The feet are faced outwards to a certain degree. As an expert in disguises, Klein believed that when a person disguised himself and prepared a certain level of anti-divination measures, there was a high chance that he wouldn't take note of disguising his build, especially when one's body didn't have any particular traits. Therefore, this can provide a certain amount of clues. This allows Klein to find the person familiar when he sees the target. Very good. It's your turn to ask. After keeping that in mind, Klein stopped scrutinizing the figure as he waited for Arrows' question with piqued interest. He was curious as to how Arrows would continue breaking through his image of him. The typing sound slowed down as it seemed to appear hesitant. Bit by bit, the illusory white paper was spat out. Great Master, see, can I say something to you? Yes, Klein answered the question, puzzled. He began to look forward to what Arrows had to say. The sound of typing hastened as it exuded an obvious sense of warmth. On the illusory paper, a single line appeared, Great Master, happy birthday. This is belated. Your current body was born on the 4th of March, 1327. I originally wanted to wish you a happy birthday at midnight of that day, but I failed to keep up with you. It's a topic that really exceeded my expectations. I even forgot about my own birthday. The corners of Klein's lips twitched as he was at a loss for words. He had received the original Klein's memory fragments and received parts of his emotions. He knew the birthday, but for a person who led a solitary life, why would he remember such things? This fellow is actually the first person to wish me a happy birthday. Benson and Melissa must be feeling more upset today. The interview should have ended in February. I wonder if Benson succeeded in becoming a civil servant. Klein felt poignant as the way he looked at the radio transceiver warmed up. He thought for a moment as he calmly asked, third question, your origins. The typing sounds paused for 2 seconds before sounding out again. A white piece of paper was spat out as a new scene surfaced. Large amounts of black sticky liquid spewed out from the ground as they spread outwards in a distorted manner. They grew different numbers of arms and legs before becoming strange monsters that charged ahead. During this process, a speck of light was shot out along with the black liquid before landing on a rock, to which it rapidly fused together, turning into a mirror with ancient patterns and black gems adorning its 2 sides. What kind of strange scene is this? This was how Arrows was born. What was that speck of light? Where did it originate from? It does seem like a beyond the characteristic. Klein came up with a preliminary interpretation of the scene. The typing sounds didn't stop as another line appeared. Great Master, do you have any other questions? Taking note of the time, Klein shook his head. No, you have finished answering the questions, and it's time for me to leave. Great Master, the ruler above the spirit world, your loyal and humble servant, Arrows, looks forward to serving you again and hopes to be able to continue following in your footsteps. By the end of the illusory piece of paper, a hand-waving emoticon was presented. Inside the quiet room in the inn, the dark and silent radio transceiver instantly returned back to normal as if surroundings stopped being eerie. Klein busily set up the ritual and sacrificed it above the grey fog before having the time to consider the answers he had received. According to the clues provided by Arrows, and combining the answers from Mr. Azike and Will Septin, Klein had a basic idea on how he should proceed. It wasn't just because he wished to return to Backland for some rest and reorganization, but because he viewed the large city as a main locale that he would spend a long period of time being active in. He wanted to see if he could steal the Antigonus family's notebook from the Church of the Evernight Goddess of St. Samuel Cathedral. If he confirmed that there weren't any solutions, he would attempt to switch to neighboring beyond the pathways, but if that was impossible, he had no choice but to take the final route, head to the main peak of the Hornus Ice Mountain Range. I definitely can't use my identity as Sherlock Moriarty when I'm back in Backland unless I wish to dig out into Zangwill or the royal family faction that's hiding in the darkness. However, when contacting people I'm familiar with or using the resources of the Church of Steam, I can transform back into Sherlock Moriarty. In short, I have to create a new identity. Furthermore, it has to be completely separate from Gem and Sparrow. I won't directly return to Prince Harbor this time. I'll make a detour to Desai Bay and make sure that no one can figure out my background. Klein's thoughts raced and he soon came up with a clear train of thought. After determining the next steps of action to take, he planned on drawing some blood and heading above the grey fog to explore Grisel's travels using his spirit body. But in consideration that there was a tarot gathering in the afternoon, he lay back in bed and took the time to rest and relax. The future smoothly cruising through the undulating waves as Admiral of Stars Catlia stood by the window, watching the scenery that seemed to go on without end. And by the deck, the Wanina's exasperated shouts from time to time. She would be angrily scolding Frank Lee for producing a bunch of fast-growing, beef-flavored mushrooms that enjoyed eating fish. Catlia sighed silently as she nudged the heavy glasses on her nose bridge. At that moment, her spiritual perception was suddenly triggered as she looked down at her study desk. At some point in time, a few pieces of yellowed paper had appeared there. The Emperor's diary entries she finally sent a messenger over. Catlia turned around in delight and picked up the few pieces of paper that were akin to a preliminary probe. By 3 in the afternoon, having memorized the symbols, Catlia saw the illusory crimson light surge at her like a tide, drowning her within. Under a high dome propped up by stone columns, Catlia saw similar red beams soar up, transforming into indistinct figures. She didn't look carefully, as she realized that a pair of familiar glasses had naturally appeared over her nose bridge. It was almost a perfect replica of the one from the outside world. Then, she caught Miss Justice elegantly stand out from the corner of her eye. Miss Justice briskly greeted the figure at the seat of honor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Audrey was in a good mood recently. After she returned to her family's castle, as an obedient daughter, she helped her mother, Lady Caitlin, resolve some psychological problems that stemmed from her age and physical condition. She received extremely good feedback, allowing her to conclude more of the acting principles for psychiatrist. Amongst them, the most important principle was to help others resolve psychological issues. She suspected that this was the reason why the potion's name was psychiatrist and not psychologist. Miss Justice is very happy. Klein appeared infected as he nodded with a smile as a response. During this process, he noticed that Mr. Hanged Man appeared to be preoccupied with concerns. He looked like he was hesitating and struggling, having not made up his mind. This means that Mr. Hanged Man is able to buy the Ocean Songster's potion formula and main ingredient, but he will have to pay a huge price. I thought he would request to pay for it in installments. The fool Klein reined in his gaze without any signs of unrest as he surveyed the area. After Miss Justice was done with her greeting, Catlia looked towards the end of the long bronze table. "Honorable Mr. Fool, I found 3 pages of Roselle's diary. Here it comes. I wonder if the 3 diary pages specially selected by Queen Mystic will be valuable. For instance, providing clues to the card of blasphemy for the seer pathway. This will be able to provide me with another alternative." Klein was filled with anticipation as he calmly and naturally said, "Very good. You can think of a request." "Yes, Mr. Fool," Catlia replied in an impeccable manner before requesting to conjure the contents of the diary pages. Upon seeing her behavior and thinking about how she acted in the dream, Klein was rather gratified. He felt like a teacher having successfully reformed a student. This is the first time Ma'am Hermit is providing Emperor Roselle's diary entries. With the standards and ability she has showcased, it's impossible for her to have failed to find it in the past. Yes, in the past, she was more of an observer. After being punished by Mr. Fool, she has truly integrated into our tarot club. Together with how Catlia had performed last week, Audrey made a judgment. Meanwhile, she sensed that Mr. Hanged Man didn't seem normal. He looked like he was anticipating something but was also unable to bring himself to part with something. She was rather intrigued. Klein didn't wait too long before the 3 diary pages were conjured and came into his hands. Derek and the other members instinctively fell silent, so as to not disturb Mr. Fool's reading. The 9th of February. Today is Bornova's birthday. He's already a healthy, strong, honest, and kind young man. His piousness has won the Church's favor. Everyone is congratulating me, saying that Bornova will definitely become a blessed, a saint. They praise him for how pure and flawless his faith is. I should be very happy, but I can't hide my dismay. I wish that my children can be more human, to have more emotions. I hope that they can be themselves, and not just a believer of a deity. However, almost everyone believes from the bottom of their hearts that Bornova's present state is excellent. Matilda is the same, likewise Facile. Most of my noble officials share the same feelings. Only Benedette shares my point of view. She has told me in private that she believes a person should be more self-centered, as long as they don't harm others. Recalling the words Zaratal had said during Bornova's birth, as well as the premonition I've had after becoming a demigod, my heart is turning heavier. Adorable angel, hey, what an adorable angel. Is this you being wary of me? Is this how you are attempting to control me? No, you can probably never understand the pride inside me. To me, so what if you're a deity? I can replace you. The 11th of February, contact with Zaratal was fruitless again. Ever since he obtained that Antigonus notebook, the number of times this secret order leader appears has been decreasing. I've no idea what secret he's scheming. Anyway, he will definitely not tell me. The 12th of February, I made a mystical item very suitable for Benedette. This can allow her to effectively avoid the hidden sage's nagging, as long as she doesn't proactively pray and seek a response. Yes, this item seems to be able to help Sat center the easternmost front of the Sonia Sea, where the battlefield of the gods is. It prevents one from being influenced by the true creator's ravings, and that place likely hides the secret to the forsaken land of God. Ha, I was only making a present for my daughter out of fun. To think that it has such powerful effects. Benedette, your dad is really the best artisan in the world. Best artisan? Does this mean that the Emperor had already reached sequence 2 of the Savant Pathway when he wrote this diary entry, that he had become an angel? With the god of steam and machinery present, this is the peak an artisan can attain. It's no wonder that Queen Mystic can freely enter and exit the battlefield of the gods. So it's because of a gift from the Emperor. Indeed, a child with parents is like a treasure. Klein felt wistful. In addition, he could sense Emperor Roselle's repressed and angry feelings from the diary entry. He used his comprehension skills that were honed from his previous life to figure out what was written in between the lines. After he became an angel, the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery obstructed him and suppressed him. The God of Steam and Machinery had exerted some influence on his youngest son, Bornova, making him become the most devout believer and appointing him as someone who could become an angel and enter the land of perfection. And this not only made Emperor Cell submit to the suppression while having misgivings, but this had also stirred thoughts of rebellion in him. The Emperor later became a public enemy of the world because of this rebellion. Klein nodded inwardly. Meanwhile, he noticed a matter regarding Zaratao. He suspected that the miracle invoker only began aiming for sequence 1 after he obtained the Antigonus family's notebook. For this, he planned many things, but something happened during his advancement, turning him into a monster. Of course, just as Arod said, Zaratao might not have lost control. He could be hiding something or plotting something. After quickly scanning through it, Klein flipped the page and looked back. It wasn't continuous, and it was brand new content. The 5th of October, a few primordial moon believers were caught by the Black Suits organization I established. They failed to complete the corresponding sacrificial ritual. Their behavior has intrigued me, as their strength seems to come directly from the Crimson Moon. Unfortunately, large amounts of data have confirmed that the Crimson Moon is really a satellite that's revolving around our planet. Then, how is it fusing physics and mystery together? With my present strength, it's not impossible to head for the Crimson Moon. At most, it will be troublesome and a little difficult, but it doesn't seem to be necessary. The 17th of October, I finally made up my mind. I will attempt to switch to the neighboring Mystery Prior pathway. Only by doing so can I become a Sequence 1. I've always suspected that the Hidden Sage is only a conceptualized uniqueness. Due to some sort of accident, it became sentient and awakened. Therefore, this pathway Sequence 1 position is likely still empty. I've long obtained the potion formula of knowledge emperor from that most ancient organization. Now, it's time to seek the corresponding ingredients. It might already belong to a particular angel, and it might have fused with an object around it, turning into a warped and evil monster, or a chaotic and terrifying sealed artifact. In short, I have to be careful. It's best that I find a suitable helper. Knowledge Emperor. This Sequence 1 potion name is rather interesting. If I hadn't directly seen the blasphemy slate, I would have imagined that it belonged to the Reader pathway, making it belong to the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Even stranger, these two pathways aren't switchable. I once discussed this matter with the mysterious leader and old Mr. Hermes. We basically came to a consensus and believed that the Reader pathway represents the omniscient part of omnipotent and omniscient, and the mystery prior savant corresponds to knowledge itself, which is categorized into two aspects. One is more about mystery, while the other is more about reality. Hey, when I become a knowledge emperor, Benedette can stop worrying about the hidden sage's infusion of knowledge. She can also stop being afraid of pursuing knowledge. The emperor eventually switched to the mystery prior pathway. I wonder if he successfully became a knowledge emperor. Perhaps it's because of this that his ties with the Church of Steam completely fractured, making him a public enemy with no one to help him. All he could do was place his hopes on the Twilight Hermit, or Klein thought poignantly as he came up with possible conjectures. Apart from that, he was rather interested in the Emperor's explanation of how the Reader pathway wasn't interchangeable with the mystery prior and savant pathway. He believed that by deepening his understanding of it, he might be able to figure out the rules and rationale behind the interchangeability of Beyonder pathways. To the typical Beyonder, the Reader, mystery prior, and savant pathway belong to the knowledge domain. There should be a very strong connection between them, yet the former is different. Reader belongs to the omniscient part of the phrase omnipotent and omniscient. Then, the secret suppliant, which is the shepherd pathway, is the omnipotent part. Then, there must be a certain intersection between the two. For example, being potent as a result of being erudite, and being erudite as a result of being potent. Therefore, they can be interchanged. Starting off from this angle, the storm pathway can be understood as omnipotence in the sea, land, and air domain. The spectator corresponds to the psyche, making it a powerful supplement for storm. Then, why can the sun pathway be interchanged with them? Considering how there was an ancient sun god who was deemed to be omnipotent and omniscient, does this mean that the sun pathway is the foundation that accommodates omnipotent and omniscient? Yes, according to such a thought process, mystery prior and savant are different aspects of knowledge itself. That's why they can be interchanged. Then, how is assassin and hunter differentiated? What about the Evernight, death, and god of combat pathways? In moments, Klein thought of many things, but he didn't have the time or sufficient knowledge to delve deeper into his analysis. All he could do was temporarily throw the corresponding questions to the back of his mind and with a third diary page to the top of the stack. At a cursory glance, Klein suddenly became focused. This was because the diary page was very different from the past ones. It didn't have a date, and the words were spaced apart. Because it was the original copy, the weight placed on the page when the words were penned was obviously out of the ordinary. Klein swept through the pages. The contents were reflected in his mind. No, impossible. How can that happen? If my predictions aren't wrong, I'm not the only one who met with that encounter. No, how can that happen? The thing that I saw tells me that everything will be destroyed. Likewise for everything I've created. No, I can't accept such an ending. I have to work hard to save myself. I can't rely on the 7 deities. As long as I ascend to the throne of Sequence 0, only then will I and the things I value be preserved. Should I attempt to pull Mr. Dorr back into the real world? No, although he claims to be only a Sequence 1, I believe that he isn't just an ordinary Sequence 1. It's very likely that he will bring unexpected catastrophe upon me. The Chinese words, which were much larger than those on the first 2 pages, had occupied the yellowed piece of paper in a haphazard manner. There wasn't much content, but it left Klein's head throbbing painfully. Back when he was writing this diary entry, Emperor Cell was very likely a Sequence 1 knowledge emperor. The content he wrote was infused with a potent sense of mystery and was colored with his emotions. This also meant that if Klein had read the contents in the real world, he might very well turn mentally unstable or go mad and lose control on the spot. Thankfully, Ma'am Hermit doesn't know Chinese. Otherwise, she would have mutated when she was memorizing the contents. Even if she doesn't understand Chinese, she must have found it especially tiring and draining. If one is exposed to it for extended periods of time, visual and auditory hallucinations can't be avoided. Furthermore, there's a high chance that early signs of losing control will appear. Klein thought, congratulating himself for his good luck. His focus quickly turned back onto the diary entry as a sense of puzzlement surfaced. What did the Emperor see that made him so emotional? His mood was also rather extreme. No, the agitation and rashness, as seen in the words, are a little abnormal. It doesn't match the image of someone who has occupied a high position for extended periods of time. It doesn't match the level of an angel. Even in his final days, he said that after he dies, he didn't care if floods deluge the heavens. He didn't lose his composure or appear that agitated back then. Who influenced him, or did something corrupt and pollute his thoughts? Also, he mentioned that he's not the only one who met with that encounter. What is he referring to? Transmigration. It's true that he isn't the only one who transmigrated for no baffling reason. There's also me, or even more. As thoughts flashed through his mind, Klein didn't waste any time. He made the 3 diary pages vanish as he smiled at Katlia. Have you thought of the request? Katlia bowed in preparation as she said, I wish to know why Emperor Cell went mad in his later years. Audrey, who was in the same row as her, blinked. She believed that she had heard wrongly, as she didn't expect Ma'am Hermit to immediately ask such a heavy question. Furthermore, how does she know that Emperor Cell went mad in his later years? Also, she only handled 3 pages, so how can she ask a question of this magnitude? It doesn't abide by the principle of equivalent exchange. Audrey had many thoughts arise in her mind, but she didn't stop Ma'am Hermit's question. Instead, she waited for Mr. Fool's response with piqued interest and inexplicable excitement. Alger, Emlyn, and Force similarly held their breaths. They cast their gaze at the end of the bronze table. Only Derek and the world seemed oblivious. Klein thought and chuckled. First, we need to accept reality. I'm not omniscient, nor am I omnipotent. He had said those words in a relaxed, self-deprecating manner, but the Hermit and company didn't show any signs of unrest. Instead, they appeared even more reverent. To them, it was obvious that Mr. Fool wasn't omnipotent and omniscient. Ignoring their guesses regarding Mr. Fool's state, this hidden existence's honorific name didn't have any related descriptions that explained the problem. Furthermore, none of the present true gods and evil gods had honorific names that involved omnipotence and omniscience. After setting their expectations, Klein began to answer the Hermit's question. I also wish to know what Russell encountered in his later years. At present, it can be confirmed that due to an unknown cause and source of stimulation, Russell cast his gaze on Sequence 0. He didn't explain what Sequence 0 corresponded to. In the Tarot Club, there were more people who knew of it than those who didn't. Even those who didn't know could have guessed something. Sequence 0, the Emperor wanted to become a god. It's no wonder that it's said that he went mad in his later years, or he knew what Sequence 0 meant as she instantly sighed. Likewise for Alger. Katlia clearly knew what Sequence 0 implied. She expressed her gratitude while in thought as she retracted her gaze. Sequence 0, Emlyn and Force ruminated over the phrase, as though they had just realized that there was a position above Sequence 1 that belonged to true gods. Derek looked at Mr. Fool with a muddled expression. He didn't understand what was wrong with Emperor Cell's attempt, someone who had a strong presence in history. In the City of Silver, if anyone had a chance, every resident would wish to become a Sequence 0 true god, so as to create a more sustainable living environment. Or to lead everyone out of the Forsaken Land. Klein didn't elaborate as he leaned back into his chair and surveyed the area. You may begin. With that said, he controlled the world to look at Derek before smiling deeply. The notary potion formula you want has been acquired. Thank you, Mr. World. According to the agreement, I will remember the debt and await your request, Derek said sincerely. All right. Klein gave a response by controlling the world before making a show of him requesting Mr. Fool to conjure the formula. Before long, the potion formula was in Little Son's hands. Derek received it in glee as he ravenously scanned the contents of the goatskin. Sequence 6, Notary. Main ingredients, 1 set of crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders, 5 feathers of a spirit-packed bird. Supplementary ingredients, 100 milliliters of radiant spirit-packed trees juice, 1 golden-rimmed sunflower, 1 white-rimmed sunflower, 5 drops of aquafern juice. Without waiting for the others to speak, the world looked at Alger and said once more, as you know, I have your Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient. Ah? Audrey and company were momentarily dumbfounded. Katlia couldn't hide her alarm as she looked at the world. She vividly remembered that Gem and Sparrow had just hunted Slaughter clichés a week ago. How did he obtain the Ocean Songster potion formula and main ingredient? Don't tell me he killed an Ocean Songster. That would be considered a quasi-high-ranking member in the Church of Storms. It's only been a week. Katlia found this unrealistic. Mr. World has also obtained the potion formula and main ingredient for Ocean Songster. He's really impressive. Derek moved his gaze from the goatskin in his hand and looked at the gentleman seated at the other end of the long bronze table. In his mind, the world's toughness had reached a whole new level, one that could match the weaker members in the 6-member council. Force was also similarly astonished as her poignancy grew deeper. She remembered that back when she first joined the Tarot Club, Mr. World gave her the impression that he was gloomy and reserved. Apart from that, nothing stood out. In the subsequent gatherings, he began to show that he was experienced and knowledgeable, as well as possessing rather impressive abilities. At a glance, he was a senior beyonder who had experienced many things, just second to Mr. Hanged Man amongst the Tarot Club members. This image had already formulated in Force's mind, but in recent months, Miss Magician was repeatedly surprised by the world. He was first capable of obtaining rather important information, and following that, he sold plenty of beyonder characteristics in a short span of time. He made her involuntarily suspect if he was a beyonder assassin who was active in the mysterious world. She feared him from the bottom of her heart, but along with that came happiness. This was because it meant that she could commission Mr. World with certain requests that would be met with high chances of success. When the new member, the Hermit, appeared, Force even imagined that Mr. World's halo would be blanketed by this powerful lady. But to her surprise, he had snatched the limelight and blinded everyone with his magnificence. To obtain the Ocean Songster potion formula, its corresponding main ingredient, and the notary potion formula was seemingly impossible by human standards. He really is impressive. I admire this kind of quiet and ordinary person who is actually very capable. Sigh, I wonder when I can become a Viscount. After this hunting competition, the winner will receive a prize that's likely something that will allow a Sanguine to become stronger. Emlyn White quickly turned his thoughts back to himself. As Audrey was sighing in amazement, she was puzzled about a matter from before. Why is the impressive Mr. World not searching for Emperor Cell's diary pages? He's not like Ma'am Hermit. He has already joined the Tarot Club for quite some time, and he doesn't need to observe. It's not like he doesn't have any requests that don't require him to search for Emperor Cell's diary pages to obtain something from Mr. Fool. Then, why isn't he searching for them? Has he privately submitted them? But why? Imperceptibly, Audrey felt that Mr. World and Mr. Fool had a connection to a certain degree, but she wasn't able to confirm it, as there were just too many possibilities. At this moment, Alger turned to the seat of honor after a few seconds of silence. Honorable Mr. Fool, I wish to communicate privately with the world. Here it comes. Klein nodded with anticipation as he isolated everyone's senses. Alger waited for 2 seconds before turning back to look at the world, Gem and Sparrow. I will use an unknown primitive island's coordinates in exchange. On the island, there aren't any extinct beyonder creatures that cannot be found on the northern and southern continent, but there's an ancient ruin of unknown age. Back then Fumit was discovered by Tilangos and me. Back then, we lacked the strength to delve deep inside it. However, he discovered certain traces, and he suspected that the ruins hide something extremely important. He believes that the value isn't lower than a card created by Emperor Cell. My strength is inferior to Tilangos, and I didn't go as deep as he did. I had no idea what he saw, other than guesses about the situation from his remarks. What Mr. Hanged Man said holds plenty of information. From the looks of it, he long knew Vice Admiral Hurricane Killang knows. They had even adventured together and found the primitive island and ancient ruins. And previously, he was also the one who thought of finishing off this pirate admiral while he was away at sea. Mr. Hanged Man isn't an ordinary member of the Church of Storms. His past seems very complicated, and he hides many secrets. Yes, a primitive island's value isn't small. For a secret organization, this can be the foundation to support the growth of its members. Klein controlled the world to appear to be in thought as he attempted to obtain more information from the Hanged Man. With the world not rejecting or agreeing, Alger, who had calmed down, calmly said, "On the island, there are traces of demigod level beyond the creatures. To you, there should be something valuable. On this point, I can swear on Mr. Fool's name. I guarantee that I'm not lying. After I obtain the Bizarro Sorcerer's potion formula, I'll have to consider how to obtain the corresponding ingredients. At the level of a demigod, money becomes of little use. Trading gives me the highest chance of obtaining something I need. The location of demigod level beyond the creatures is important. That ruin is also quite interesting." The world didn't hesitate as he chuckled. Deal. Alger didn't immediately receive the ocean songster potion formula. Instead, he said, "I have a condition. I wish that on your first exploration of the primitive island, that you will do it with me. With Mr. Fool watching all of this, I believe you won't be concerned that I'll be up to no good." Klein considered it for a moment and made the world nod. "No problem. I will need companions when heading to dangerous places. I hope that you will have the required strength." Alger wasn't angered by the world's tone as he heaved a sigh of relief. "That's why I wish that your first exploration will be after I advance. Of course, if I were to lose control because of my potion, this agreement will naturally be null and void." "No problem," the world replied without any qualms. Alger didn't harp on the topic. After obtaining Mr. Fool's agreement, he conjured the situation of the primitive island on a goatskin. It's along the periphery of the Roasted Sea. It's quite a big island, almost the size of Blue Mountain Island. Klein received the goatskin and quickly scanned through it to gain a general understanding of the primitive island. He quickly looked up and said, "I'll hand over the potion formula and main ingredient after the gathering ends." All right. Having made his choice, Alger no longer had any reservations. When hearing that, he felt upheavals going through his heart, but he appeared even more stayed on the surface. After the duo's private conversation came to an end, Cat Clear retracted her gaze at the world and looked at Force. "The meteorite crystal has been obtained. 600 pounds for 60 grams. That's fast. Ma'am Hermit is really efficient." Force felt delighted, but she was also stumped. After last week's gathering, she had already obtained the crystallized blood of a Lavo squid. For that, she had paid 600 pounds, leaving her with 230 pounds. Adding the 150 pounds she received this week from her royalties, she was still short of 220 pounds. "I'll first borrow from Xio. She should have that much. After I succeed in advancing, I'll try to earn money as quickly as possible. I have to." Force silently drew a breath and said, "All right. We will do the transaction tomorrow at this time." The hermit tersely acknowledged and, without wasting any time, looked at Audrey. "The black hunting giant lizard spinal fluid has been confirmed. 1,800 pounds. There are temporarily no clues for the illusory chine tree's fruit. That's already very good, better than I expected." "Thank you, Ma'am Hermit." Audrey sincerely thanked her without even minding the price. She recently realized that there was a benefit to establishing the Relic Search and Preservation Foundation. She could use her funds in a more secretive and unnoticeable manner. It made it difficult for her parents to notice. After confirming the two transactions, Catclear surveyed the members as though she was one of them. "Any clues to the blood of a mythical creature?" Klein immediately controlled the world as he chuckled with a hoarse voice. "Are you referring a pure mythical creature?" "Pure mythical creature? There are impure mythical creatures." Audrey and company were puzzled but interested by what they heard. Catclear was taken aback as she said, "A pure one, which means the blood of an angel. One drop is enough." She didn't introduce it in detail back then, because she believed that for the time being such a high-level object wouldn't appear in the Tarot Club unless Mr. Fool was willing to provide her with help. And clearly, Mr. Fool didn't need anyone to explain to him what a mythical creature was. "I have certain clues, but I can't guarantee that I can obtain it. Furthermore, it might take another 3 months at least." Klein controlled the world to give the response. The other Tarot Club members fell silent. They never expected the world to have clues to an angel's blood. What can't he accomplish? Audrey, Force, and company had their impression of Mr. World refreshed again. As for Alger, he suspected that the world would seek Mr. Fool's angel for a drop of blood. After a brief moment of silence, Emlyn, who suddenly realized that his advancement wasn't necessarily as obvious as the other members, weakly said, "Are there any clues regarding my previous commission?" Force immediately said, "There are suspected cases. I will continue investigating." Burdened with debt, she was motivated to work. At the end of the trading segment, Derek mentioned his request of buying the crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders. As for the feathers of a spirit-packed bird, the City of Silver had it in their special warehouse. In addition, he also sought to purchase the golden-edged sunflower and other supplementary ingredients. They were commonly seen items in the outside world, but they were lacking in the forsaken land of God. The crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders and the supplementary ingredients aren't difficult to obtain. Emlyn's attention was caught as he said, "Then, what can you use in exchange?" Back when he provided Miss Justice with the fruit of the Tree of Elders, he had already learned where the crystallized roots were. Derek thought and said, "Beyond the characteristic of a Sequence 5 vampire, it was quite a commonly seen monster in the depths of the darkness." "Sanguine," Emlyn said through gritted teeth. "There's no rush. I'll tell you when I've decided what I need." He didn't want an item obtained from a transaction to overlap with the prize of the hunting competition. All right, having already owed a debt to the world, Derek was relatively at ease. After a moment of silence, Klein rapped the edge of the mottled table to indicate the commencement of the free exchange. Inside the ancient palace standing above the grey fog, Alger wasn't in a rush to mention the matter regarding crazy Captain Connor's Victor. He turned his head to look at the sun. "Are you still in Afternoon Town?" Derek nodded honestly. "Yes, we took a very long time to establish a camp. Later, with small teams, we wiped out the remnant monsters, one street at a time, in search of any ancient ruins that might still exist. Although this process is slow, it's sufficiently safe." His answer was extremely detailed, and it gave the impression that Mr. Hanged Man could ask more questions if he wished to know more. Audrey listened with interest as she raised her hand slightly. "With all of you staying in Afternoon Town for so long, what do you rely on for food? Is there any black-faced grass nearby?" She had long heard from Little Sun that the City of Silver relied on the black-faced grass that they grew around the city as their source of sustenance. "We carried a portion of powdered black-faced grass, but the main source of food comes from hunting those monsters. Once the beyond characteristic is expelled, a large proportion of them can be eaten once we skim them and roast them with fire." However, there's a certain degree of corruption in the meat, which will result in psychological problems. We can't continuously consume the meat, and we will need to spread out the intervals, Derek replied in a serious manner to Miss Justice's question. Audrey recalled the few monsters in the depths of the darkness mentioned by Little Sun, and having terrifying vibes about the dark and eerie area around the City of Silver, she couldn't help but press further. Wouldn't that be very disgusting? Force, who was attentively listening to the other members' conversation, was inspired by this question. She deliberately didn't look at Emlyn as she asked Derek with piqued curiosity. I remember you mentioning that monsters in the depths of the darkness include vampires. Their bodies run with pus and are extremely ugly. Then, how would you consume vampires after killing them? Emlyn, who heard the question, forgot to correct her by informing her that Sanguine weren't vampires. His expression turned livid as he felt an inexplicable feeling of indescribable horror. Derek was silent for 2 seconds before saying, there are some monsters that are indeed disgusting, very disgusting. Just like the vampires as mentioned by Miss Magician, but we have no choice. As long as it's edible, we will eat it. His voice gradually turned heavy, as though he once again deeply felt the tragedy that was the curse which enveloped the City of Silver. The palace that looked like a giant's residence fell silent once again. Even Emlyn, who wanted to retort Derek, didn't say a word. All he did was curl his lips and retract his arm. A few seconds later, the world broke the silence with a chuckle. Let's return to the sea. There have been certain matters that require your attention. Crazy Captain Connor's Victor's Syncline scull drifted to a nearby harbour after a storm. The masts were snapped, and there were charred marks. The entire crew, including Connor's Victor, died. No one survived. Justice and company didn't know who Crazy Captain was. They weren't too interested in the news, other than being curious as to what caused this destructive naval tragedy. On the other hand, Alger shared completely different thoughts from them. There must be a tremendous secret if the world is paying attention to the matter regarding Crazy Captain. It's no wonder His Eminence Scotsman issued such an important command to get the mandated Punisher and captains to investigate the situation. Alger's eyes darted about slightly as he said after some thought, in Bayam, the Church of Storms is actively investigating the people and matters surrounding Crazy Captain Connor's Victor. Hey, there's no need for me to commission it. Klein chuckled inwardly and got the world to directly ask, what clues does the Church of Storms possess? I have no idea. I'll try my best to understand the situation. Alger frankly shook his head. He believed that the world understood what he was implying, that he wasn't exactly sure, but he would sound out what the Church knew. Audrey, who was listening out of curiosity, realized that the matter regarding Crazy Captain wasn't simple. Hence, she asked probingly, Mr. World, isn't this common in fighting among pirates? Klein was just about to be perfunctory with Miss Justice, but without divulging anything further when he suddenly thought of a problem. Behind the great smog of Backland and the disappearances, there might be a particular faction from the royal family. It also included some military personnel. And Miss Justice would lean towards the nobles and royal family, both her emotions and from her standpoint. If there comes a day when I target those bastards who are deserving of death, she might not find it acceptable if I commission a mission to her. She might even fall into a dilemma. Therefore, I should now inject the impression in her that the royal family and military have plenty of bad guys. I would subtly change the direction in which her standpoint and emotions are directed towards. For this, I can bear the burden that some of the information regarding the world is leaked. Klein thought for a moment and made the world say with a relaxed, but mocking tone. Crazy Captain is related to the disappearance of the colonial slaves which Mr. Hanged Man was previously investigating. The Demoness sect takes the people who are tricked or abducted and hands them over to Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy. And they have them ship the people over to the northern continent's East Seas coast. Then, with Crazy Captain Connor's Victor, it completes the last mile. This pirate is intricately tied with many human traffickers and slave merchants in Loan. Back when I informed Mr. Hanged Man of the news in January, someone witnessed Bellon, who was involved in the disappearance cases, with an MI9 member who is loyal to the royal family. Also, Backland's largest human trafficker, Capheim, had guards from the Arbiter Pathway. With so many matters compounded together, do you think the Crazy Captain's death is simply a result of pirate infighting? Hey, I've always wondered why the person behind all of this needs so many slaves. The connections between the clues were clearly presented before Audrey, Alger, and company. It made them suddenly realize a lot of things. Mr. World left Backland and headed for the sea to seek out clues. He's always been investigating the truth behind the Great Smog and Prince Edisake's death. According to the information he provided, it's clear that the true murderer hasn't been punished. He's still hidden inside the royal family, and there's a portion of the military who are working for him. How despicable. This kind of person should be thrown into hell. How does Mr. World know that the guards around Capine were beyonders from the Arbiter Pathway? Did he fight with them? Audrey's mind raced as she suddenly made the connection. Capine was killed by Hero Bandit Black Emperor. The latter clearly knew which pathway Capheim's guards belonged to. Hero Bandit Black Emperor is Mr. Fool's blessed. Mr. World is suspected to have certain connections with Mr. Fool. He has never sought Emperor Asel's diary pages. Therefore, Mr. World is Hero Bandit Black Emperor, and he's also Mr. Fool's blessed. He doesn't hand in Emperor Asel's diary pages because he hands them over in private. Some of his actions from before were to hide his identity as a blessed. This is a test given to him by Mr. Fool. It's really hard to connect Mr. World with Hero Bandit Black Emperor. The latter feels like a hero. Audrey felt like she had stumbled upon the truth as she began to wonder what kind of person Mr. World, who was also Hero Bandit Black Emperor, was actually like in real life. Alger and Catclear instantly understood why Gem and Sparrow had attacked Tracy. This blessed was seeking out the truth behind the great smog of Backland. And the truth hidden behind this was something Mr. Fool was interested in. Force and Emlyn, who lived in Backland, also vaguely sensed something when the world mentioned Capheim. After all, Hero Bandit Black Emperor's legend was rather striking in the recent half a year. He became an important character in many run-of-the-mill novels. Even Force herself had thought of making him the protagonist in a love story between a hero bandit and a young royal lady. They finally understood why the world had noticed in time that something was brewing in Backland and that a tragedy was about to happen. This was because this gentleman had been tracking the corresponding clues the entire time. From the looks of it, the matter in Backland is far from over. There will likely be another accident in the future. I really wish to flee from this place immediately, but Xio definitely wouldn't want to. I have no way of explaining this to her. Force suddenly had thoughts of fleeing Backland. Emlyn wasn't too afraid. From his point of view, the Sanguine's important figures were in Backland and were definitely able to provide some protection if a disaster really happened. After 2 seconds of silence, Alger said in a serious manner, I will try my best to investigate this matter. He had already sensed that the truth behind Crazy Captain's death hid a rather terrifying storm. As such, he was a little apprehensive and afraid, but he also trembled with excitement that he was involved in the most important matter regarding the southern and northern continents. After Catclear heard that, she nodded. I will also seek out relevant information. If there are more clues provided, perhaps I might be able to help. Klein thought for a moment before letting the world speak frankly. On the night of Crazy Captain's death, a high-sequence beyonder suspected to be from the Black Emperor pathway appeared on his ship. However, this demigod managed to escape before Jin Gautman arrived. Black Emperor pathway, demigod Alger and Gatlia ruminated over these phrases as they considered an angle of attack. Audrey and company were astonished that the Tarot Club had discussed the development of demigods to something directly involving demigods. The cases that they were involved in were really increasing in level. As for Derek, he didn't understand a thing. With Crazy Captain's matter coming to pass, Gatlia glanced at the world before deliberately mentioning her tidbit. Another incident happened at sea. Last week, the crazy adventurer Gemman Sparrow hunted the second mate of the King of Immortality, Slaughter Shays. He was a Sequence 5 Beyonder. How impressive, Force, who was only a Sequence 8, sighed from the bottom of her heart. She knew very well what it meant to be a Sequence 5. Yes, he really is a legendary adventurer, Audrey echoed. Emlyn turned the gate before he closed his mouth. He felt that he was still a distance away from that level. Alger said without any signs of unrest, it's because of this that the investigation of Gemman Sparrow's origins has become an important mission of the various major organizations. Are you implying that the Church of Storms has gotten you to investigate me? Klein instantly reading between the lines as he made the word chuckle. I wonder where I can claim this commission. I wish to use some unimportant information in exchange for money. I have some understanding of Gemman Sparrow. Oh, Mr. World is hinting that he doesn't mind me exchanging what appears to be important but, in reality, is actually meaningless information regarding Gemman Sparrow in exchange for rewards and trust. The Hanged Man nodded in enlightenment. The free exchange continued for a while until Derek finished learning this week's list of ancient Hermes terms before everything came to a close. After he watched the Boeing Miss Justice and company leave, Klein cast his gaze onto Grassel's travels. Not finding himself overly exhausted, Klein rubbed his temples and beckoned over a tiny metallic bottle from the junk pile. Inside it was a tiny tube of blood that he went through great effort to extract from his vein, and he had long brought it above the grey fog. It was only waiting for the opportunity when Klein would use his spirit body to enter Grassel's travels to explore the book world. After opening the cap, Klein wasn't in a hurry to smear the blood over the book's dark brown cover. Instead, he summoned all the items from the junk pile that he had brought to the mysterious space before the Tarot gathering, and he spread them out in front of him. In consideration of how the Black Emperor's form was too eye-catching, and with him not too certain of the exact situation in the book world, Klein decided against bringing the card of blasphemy. Instead, he used Azite's copper whistle to fortify his spirit body to prevent himself from failing to return above the grey fog before being instantly killed by some unknown power. As the ancient and exquisite copper whistle fused into his body, Klein's spirit body swelled up and became more corporeal. Two pitch-black flames flared out from his eye sockets as though they possessed a life of their own. With the help of cogitation, he adjusted his spirituality, converging the iciness that stemmed from the aspect of death within his body. Soon, his eyes returned to normal. This was like an evil spirit taking on an ordinary form to lure prey into its proximity. Right on the heels of that, Klein wore creeping hunger and held death knell while he hid the nightmare beyond a characteristic in his body. The latter was prepared for him to seek out any abnormalities when exploring the dreams of the living entities in the book world. After completing all his preparations, he poured a few drops of blood and smeared it over the cover of Grassel's travels. After a brief wait, his vision turned blurry, as though countless translucent objects were hidden within it. Following that, it turned clear. There were blue skies, white clouds, greyish-brown city walls, and passers-by. This is no longer the land of ice and snow from before, but a city that looks very normal on the surface. Klein stood by the side of the dirt road as he observed the residents of the book world. He discovered that most of them wore linen shirts, a short brown coat, and loose dark-coloured trousers. Their overall style was akin to that of the Lowen Kingdom centuries ago. He looked down at the format of the tailcoat, starched shirt, and damaged dark red bow tie as he silently changed it all out. Instantly, he was no different from the people around him. He then walked to the city gates in preparation to enter. At that moment, a leather-vested soldier at the gate stopped him. Entrance fees, 1 little. Do I look rich? I don't even know what a little is, Klein mumbled inwardly, amused. He then communicated with him at a spiritual level, successfully transferring the soldier's attention onto a merchant caravan behind him. As a quasi-wraith who could possess anyone and control them, exerting a psychological influence on others was nothing extraordinary. It wasn't a particularly potent ability, but it was extremely useful against ordinary people. When Klein entered the city, he walked through the streets in a seemingly relaxed manner, but he inwardly remained wary. He felt that public hygiene was slightly better than Backland a few years ago. It appeared to have a mature sewage system, preventing the situation of any waste and trash being dumped. I couldn't tell that this is an illusory world inside a book at all. Everyone whose spirit body threads, Klein proceeded forward as he observed. Suddenly, he noticed a stone building that was more than 10 meters tall to his side. It only had 2 stories, and the top of the door was about 4 meters tall. Beside the building was a signboard. It was written in a language that was completely different from any of the outside world's languages, but Klein instantly understood what it meant. Peso Blacksmith Guild. There's a blacksmith guild. This place really hasn't entered the age of steam. Just as Klein was feeling poignant, he saw the door creak open, and out walked a giant with 4 long limbs. The giant's skin was greyish-blue, and his head had the trademark single vertical eye. In his hand was a huge and heavy sledgehammer. He walked across the street with his lips curled. The humans walking past him didn't show any fear, as though it was a common sight. They even greeted the giant. Good afternoon, Grassel. Grassel Klein, who was rather face-blind to giants, had his pupils constrict. Only then did he realize their familiarity. He was just about to chase after them when he discovered that the giant had turned into another street, vanishing from his sights. Klein stood on the spot, silently observing the intersection as he came up with a few guesses. There's another Grassel in the book world. No, the ending of the travels is that Grassel died in battle in the Nation of Frost. This is another story, filled with all kinds of questions. Klein wasn't in a rush to find Grassel. He turned and entered a bar by the side of the street. Such places were often the places with the most messy and multifarious information in a city. It aided him in quickly gaining a grasp of the entire situation. The bar's lighting was dim, and the ventilation wasn't the best, making the air appear somewhat turbid. At that moment, there weren't many customers drinking. Most of the people were by the bar counter, chatting happily with each other or the bartender. Klein slowly walked over when his gaze froze. He saw a man wearing a black pointed hat and an asymmetrical coat by the side of the bar counter. He looked pretty handsome with his flaxen-coloured hair, deep brown eyes, a high nose, and thin lips. He was none other than the Solomon Empire Viscount, Medzerost. Upon seeing him, Klein recalled the scene of the dream stealer's rapid aging before he collapsed onto the ground as he struggled to crawl towards elvish songster Seatters and grabbed her hand. All of that remained clear as day, as though it had just happened yesterday. Yet, Moat had once again appeared before his eyes. Klein's expression grew heavy as he walked over and sat beside Moat. He didn't say a word, as he knew that Moat was one to start a conversation. Outsider, first time in Pessoa? I swear I've never met you before. Moat put down a cup of distilled liquor as he turned his head to the side. I come from the nation of Frost. Klein randomly cooked up a story. Moat immediately laughed loudly. You're a funny one. This is the nation of Frost, but of course, that was many years ago. Ever since the king of the north was killed by a bunch of adventurers, no, heroes, this place is no longer plagued by ice and snow. Everyone believes that it should be called the nation of Neve Winter. Klein fell silent without responding. Why so serious? It looks like you have your own troubles. Moat rapped on the wooden bar counter, showing signs of sympathy. He downed a mouthful of spirits and said, I'm telling you. Men should absolutely not get married. It's the beginning of suffering. Do you know, when she gets worked up a little, she would beat me up. When she's happy, she beats me up. Same when she's embarrassed or angry. Anyway, she beats me up for any reason. From this very moment, I've decided not to return home again. Does this mean you got married to Seatters? Klein kept silent for 2 seconds as he sized up Moat's face. He discovered that there were no signs of bruises and swelling on his face. This meant that the elvish songster knew that men needed to put on appearances. He asked with a sigh, then why did you marry her? Moat was taken aback as he smiled wryly. I came here with a merchant caravan. When I first saw her, she was just that beautiful. Her singing was moving and seemed to hide indescribable sorrow. Hey, I'm as afraid of her now as I was infatuated over her back then. I definitely won't return. Hey, why do you seem a little sad? You don't have to be sad for me. I'm already free. At that moment, the door to the bar suddenly opened as a beautiful female voice shouted. Moat, come out here. I'm counting from 10. Never come back if you don't come home. 10, 9, Moat immediately jumped up and ran to the door. As he ran, he muttered, I know you don't have any patience. You always jump to 2 after counting to 8. Klein turned his body and saw Seatters' figure, but he no longer had the intention of communicating with her. The real Moat and Seatters were already dead. The ones living in the book world were just 2 characters. Standing up and leaving the bar, Klein came to a nearby deserted alley. He planned on confirming the kind of spirit world this world had. He quickly outlined spherical lights in his mind as his thoughts gradually emptied out and his body and mind became tranquil. As his spirituality spread out bit by bit, several indescribable illusory figures appeared around him. However, up high in the sky, it lacked the 7 lustrous brilliances of different colors that contained endless knowledge. The 7 lights don't exist here. The number of spirit world creatures here are lacking. This place is indeed a fake spirit world created by the book. Klein took a step forward and found the colors. In his vision saturated to the extreme as it overlapped with the obvious differences. He wasn't in a rush to explore the spirit world. He exited it and began window shopping through Pessoa and chatted with others. Before long, he found Grisel's residence. The giant ran a blacksmith shop. He was taking an afternoon nap on a huge bed on the 2nd story. Klein directly entered by passing through the wall and came to Grisel's side. He observed the giant for a few seconds and took out the nightmare beyond the characteristic from his spirit body. With some difficulty, he used some of its powers that it came naturally equipped with. Deep, serene darkness quickly spread as it instantly enveloped Klein and Grisel. And in a spirit body state, Klein directly saw a blob of irregular hazy spherical light. His spirituality immediately emanated over and touched the spherical light. All sorts of scattered scenes instantly flashed past around him before fixating on a forest with towering but withered trees. On the other side of the forest was a mountain and steep cliffs. At the top of it was a magnificent palace. The palace was huge and opulent, and it didn't seem suitable for humans. It gave him the impression like it was from a myth as the light of dusk that scattered above it seemed frozen. Klein had seen this palace before. It was the giant king's court that had appeared in the dream world of the battlefield of the gods. However, this angle was completely different from before. He was situated behind the king's court. Klein turned his gaze to the forest, where light could hardly penetrate through its denseness, having gained a rough idea of where he was. This was the waning forest, which Grisel guarded when he was at the giant king's court. The trees in the forest were tens of meters tall, and the thickness of the trees was the arm span of several giants. However, their barks were mottled with signs of rot everywhere. The leaves and twigs were mostly withered and dropping as they interwove with each other like a dark cloud floating in mid-air. Grisel and similar-looking giants guarded the boundary of the forest, either carrying axes or broadswords, fully concentrating on defending the area. According to Grisel, this waning forest has the bodies of giant King Ormir's father and mother buried in it. Apart from this ancient god, no one else is allowed to step inside, including these guards. Yes, giant King Ormir's parents should be so-called original giants, the kind that was the craziest, cruelest, and most ferocious. Perhaps why would Grisel have such a dream? As Klein was in thought, he suddenly sensed something amiss. According to his random conversations in Pessoa, the present Grisel was a native giant who had nothing to do with the giant king's court. Therefore, having such a dream made it appear rather abnormal. From the psychology alchemist's theory which Mam Daddy and Miss Justice have discussed before, perhaps the book world will use or clone the original character's subconscious or collective subconscious when creating a character. Then, it would make minor changes, making the consciousness fulfill the required settings. Therefore, Grisel's dream will be influenced by his subconscious, reproducing life in the giant king's court if that's the case. It can only be said that this book is a cruel author. The moment Klein thought of this, he suddenly had an idea. He felt that this was an opportunity for him to gather relevant information on the giant king's court. He previously planned on directly learning about such matters through Grisel. But in order to keep his promise, the giant guardian had died in the battle with King of the North. You listen. After his spirit body left the book world, it quickly dissipated without giving him any chance of communicating. Now, he finally had another method, which was to explore Grisel's dream. There had to be parts of it that were ridiculous or exaggerated, but the remaining content had to be a true reflection of reality. As long as an approach of careful study is employed, it's not impossible to distinguish the two. Grisel never entered the waning forest, so the scenes inside must stem from his imagination. There's no need to explore it. Klein slowly cast his gaze onto the mountain where the king's court was. It wasn't tall, which meant that the waning forest was on a mountain rather close to the king's court. It was probably just a straight path from there to the ancient god's residence. Klein didn't waste time searching as he walked straight to Grisel and acted like he knew him well. He asked it in a relaxed tone, how should I return to the king's court? He knew that Grisel was an honest giant, and he would only be more honest in his dream. Grisel raised his hand to scratch the back of his head as he looked down with a confused look. He said with a smile, isn't it simply by taking the Baron Tunnel? He pointed ahead and added, you'll see it when you circle around that boulder. Thank you, Klein sighed as he said with a bow. As he watched Klein depart, Grisel scratched the back of his head again, muttering to himself in confusion, who is he? Why do I find him so familiar? After circling a boulder that protruded out the mountain, the scene opened up before Klein's eyes. A gigantic cave at least 30 meters tall appeared. Erected outside the cave was a stone stele. Engraved on it was a single vertical eye, a high nose, and plush lips. It looked like a giant's head had been squeezed in to reveal the frontal facial features. Just as Klein approached, the mouth on the stele opened. "Why are you returning to the king's court ahead of time?" "By His Majesty's orders," Klein said in an unflustered tone. After all, the intelligence level of all the living beings in this dream was equivalent to the owner of the dream, Grissel. The lips on the stele opened and closed as it let out a humming sound. "Please answer a question. Otherwise, you shall not pass." "If only I brought along arrows, it should be rather fun to see what happens," Klein ampooned as he calmly nodded. "Okay." The stele's lips closed for 3 seconds before opening. "If your wife, daughter, and a woman you covet ask you to judge which of them is most beautiful, who would you choose?" This is completely different from the magic mirror style. Klein's lips quivered as his mind raced. Using nearly 10 seconds, he answered, "My intelligence is insufficient to determine this matter. I will assign someone who is more intelligent than me to give the answer." "How can I answer something that can get me killed?" He gritted his teeth as he added, "Who is this more intelligent person?" The giant's face on the stele froze for a few seconds. Klein solemnly answered, "Of course it's our king." The stele was shocked beyond words. It took quite a moment before it said, "All right, I'll consider it as you answering the question. You may pass." Klein immediately crossed the strange stele and walked into the cave. The ground in the cave was paved with large stone panels that had been weathered. The sides and top of the cave were filled with murals, speaking of stories of the giants and dragons battling the demonic wolves, mutants, devils, and phoenixes. The drawing style was crude, and the color choice was dark. However, it was extremely vivid. Klein walked forward as he observed the murals. He discovered that there were swaths of withered weeds, as well as all kinds of coarse gravel in between the stone panels in the bottom of the murals. And the lack of water and the decline of life became more apparent the deeper he ventured inside. After walking for an unknown period of time, Klein saw a huge greyish-blue open door. Standing on each side of the door was a 4 to 5 meter tall giant. The giants guarding this place were different from Grissel and the others. They wore solid and beautiful iron black armor and firm, exquisite helms. They looked like 2 huge statues. They didn't stop Klein and allowed him to pass through the door and enter the hall within. The hall wasn't too spacious. The ends of the hall could be seen clearly, and it could probably only hold 5 to 6 giants. As Klein was observing his environment, he suddenly halted. Then, the hall seemed to be pulled up by an invisible hand as it quickly rose. He staggered a little before finding his footing. All he saw were greyish-black walls flashing by as they kept sweeping downwards. In about 10 seconds, there was a thud as the hall stopped ascending. At this moment, it wasn't the cave tunnel outside the door, but a magnificent palace propped up by stone columns. Klein briskly left the original hall as he sized up his surroundings with piqued interest. This is the Giant King's Court's elevator. This seems to be the place where the guards live. Outside is a long table taller than humans, with extremely large chairs. On the 2 sides are rooms, and inside them are neatly ordered beds. Klein swept past the various items in the hall before he stopped at a mural. The mural's main character was a giant dressed in full-body silver armor. As there was nothing to scale, Klein was unable to know exactly how tall he was. The giant stood by the side of the cliff, with a sword in hand pointing diagonally upwards. His body emitted a bright halo, like a rising sun illuminating the surroundings. Many giants were genuflecting around him, as though praying or worshipping him and awaiting a bestowment. The Giant King's son, God of Dawn, bade Heilbronn. Klein looked at the face of the mural's main character in thought, and he saw that his face was blocked by a mask. There was only a dawn-like halo coming from his eyes. It's very similar to the God of Combat statue in the background underground ruins. His face is completely hidden behind the mask. Hey, Queen Mystic said before that the God of Combat is a giant who lived from ancient times. Therefore, their church's headquarters, the Great Twilight Hall, resembled the Giant King's court. Could it be the son of the Giant King? God of Dawn escaped the destruction of the King's court, and at a certain point in time, he managed to retake the authority wielded by his father. Klein made a bold guess, but he lacked any evidence or clues. He used the correspondence principle to look at the wall opposite the mural. There was also a mural there, but the main character was no longer God of Dawn, bade Heilbronn. Instead, it was a female giant in a leather vest and long skirt. This female giant stood sideways. Her facial contours were soft, and her single vertical eye was focused beneath her. Long, dark brown hair reached all the way to her back. Her right hand was spread out as she held items like wheat and fruits. Around her were golden fields, clear lakes, and trees covered with fruits and colorful mushrooms. Giant Queen, Goddess of Harvest, Omabella. Klein looked around, but he didn't see the mural representing Giant King Ormir. There's no depiction of the ancient god, because this is the residence of remote guards. Then, going out from here will likely be the interior of the Giant King's court. Klein carefully walked to the door. He used the method he employed in the dream world of the battlefield ruins of the gods by activating creeping hunger and using the strength of a zombie to open the door. However, there wasn't a palace in the frozen dusk that he had imagined outside. Instead, it was a grey, hazy world. It appeared to be a cliff with a bottomless pit. According to Miss Justice's previous experience, this is likely the boundary of the dream. The only way is to head down and enter Grissel's subconscious. Finally, at arrive at the Sea of Collective Subconscious, Miss Justice discovered a mind dragon in the human Sea of Collective Subconscious where she was. Then, in this book world created by the Dragon of Imagination, what would be contained in the Sea of Collective Subconscious? Klein's mind whirred as he conjured a staircase that led down into the hazy world. The staircase didn't head straight down but spiraled around deep into the grey haze. The bottom couldn't be seen, nor were any of the details of the mind world that were possible to discern. After silently observing it for a few seconds, Klein walked forward as he got onto the staircase and carefully walked down it. The surrounding light gradually dimmed with a grey, hazy luster that enveloped the extremely silent world. The moment Klein proceeded down the staircase, he felt more and more like he was being locked inside a dark, silent room. Slowly, his ears could hear his sloshing blood and his beating heart. The latter sped up as it was invaded by panic and horror which he could hardly keep in check. Klein focused his mind as he imagined the stacks of spherical light so as to stabilize his emotions and recover. To his side, a greyish-white cliff coldly stood there, a representation of the domain of Grassel's consciousness. It was silent as though it were dead, but the surrounding greyness would occasionally coruscate. Klein focused his gaze and saw that in one of the points of light, there was a giant who ripped apart a human before stuffing it into his mouth, as well as Grassel panicking. Back then, the latter was less than 3 meters tall, and it was clearly still an adolescent. The point of light flashed past, appearing in the frozen dusk that scattered over the mountain peak. Time here seemed to become impeded. Klein was just about to seek out any valuable information in Grassel's subconscious when he suddenly heard sounds akin to a beast's panting. With a whoosh, a huge palm appeared from the surrounding haze. Its skin was greyish-blue and was covered with signs of rot. On it was an obvious yellowish-green liquid as it quickly grabbed at Klein's ankle. Amidst the panting sound, similar palms rose up one after another from the staircase below, as though they were attempting to forcibly pull Klein's spirit body into the mind world's darkest and most unfathomable zone. Instantly, these rotting palms formed a dense horse as they kept struggling upwards and let out sounds of horrible, hair-raising panting. It made Klein instinctively jump up 3 steps. However, the countless palms that belonged to giant corpses didn't stop. They squirmed along the staircase as they surged upwards, covering every inch of space. Klein was just about to reach out his right palm to draw Death Knell and use purifying bullets combined together with Death Knell's slaughter ability to finish off the countless monsters when two questions suddenly flashed in his mind. Where do these palms come from? Why would they be inside Grassel's subconscious? The moment this thought came to mind, his spiritual perception was triggered. Klein came to a realization as he immediately abandoned his thoughts of using Death Knell. He calmed his breathing and imagined the spherical lights. The huge, rotting palms took this opportunity to reach his feet as they grabbed his calves and ankles. At that moment, they silently vanished as though they had never appeared. Indeed, this is an illusion created by Grassel's subconscious. Here, minds don't just face each other, but they interact with them as well. If one lacks the corresponding beyond the powers, the deeper one goes, the easier it is to have an emotional breakdown. Intrusion by the other party's subconscious will slowly happen until one's beyond the powers are severely tainted. As a result, one will become a mental patient that will never be able to recover their rationality. And this might very well lead to a loss of control. This is different from communicating with spirits. Corruption isn't avoided simply by maintaining lucidity and reason. This is because one is already inside the target's beyond the powers. Klein muttered to himself, having figured out something. He hesitated for a few seconds before turning around to climb back up the stairs. He gave up on venturing deep into Grassel's mind world because he lacked the beyond the powers to placate his own mind. Insisting on heading down was equivalent to suicide. I'll consider exploring again after I find a mystical item that targets this aspect. Klein determined his thoughts as he walked faster. Finally, with a leap, he returned to Grassel's dreamscape and returned to the guard's quarters in the giant king's court. He already felt exhausted, so he immediately left the dream, walking out of Grassel's blacksmith through the walls before observing the wonders of the book world. I've already met Grassel, Mabet, and Seatters. And while I was casually chatting with others, I also heard of the devout priest, Snowman, and the philosopher, Franzir. However, there isn't an Anderson Hood, Edna Edwards, Danitz, or Gemman Sparrow. Therefore, only the dead will possess brand new characters in the book. Or could it be that only those who had stayed in here for extended periods of time, fully expressing themselves as an adventurer in their day-to-day lives, would be able to have their subconscious replicated? As Klein strolled by the side of the street which was illuminated by the setting sun, he considered something that he found crucial. If it were the former theory, where the dead would revive and become new characters, then there was nothing Klein needed to worry about. However, if it was the latter, he had to consider reducing the frequency at which he explored the book, as well as strictly control the amount of time he spent in it each time. There's no way to ascertain it for now. I'll deal with the situation by assuming it's the latter. There's definitely nothing wrong with being cautious. Klein quickly made up his mind and was about to return above the grey fog. At that moment, he saw another familiar figure. Franzir, with his black hair and blue eyes, was sitting on a long, wooden chair by the street. He was staring blankly at the sky, which seemed to be alit in flames, as though he was in thought. Recalling how this low-end soldier's Ashern was still with him, he planned on sending it back to the Church of Storms cemetery in Bagland. Klein silently sighed and walked over before sitting beside him. He asked as though it was a casual conversation, "What's on your mind?" "I'm wondering who I am, where I come from, how I should return." Franzir didn't look away as he said in a dreamlike state. Without waiting for Klein to ask another question, he shook his head with a chuckle. "I ultimately feel that I don't belong here. I'm not myself at the moment, and that there's some place awaiting my return. They always mock me for considering such pointless questions, so they gave me the title of philosopher." As he spoke, he looked at the setting sun and once again fell into silence and looked spellbound. Klein didn't say a word. He sat there quietly and accompanied Franzir in watching the sunset. Finally, he silently vanished. Franzir didn't notice that the person beside him had already left. He sat there motionless like a marble statue, looking far into the distance. After replenishing the ship's supplies, Alger Wilson instructed the Blue Avenger to leave the Resistance's private harbor. It wasn't going to stay too long in the Roasted Archipelago. He had to return to Paju Island to make his report by the designated time. At that moment, in the captain's cabin, he was watching in anticipation of the illusory door that was formed by items with spirituality and the burgeoning flame. It was the door of sacrifice, and it was also a door of bestowment. Amidst an illusory creaking sound, the mysterious door slowly opened, revealing an infinite depth and darkness within its interior. Light shot out from within before converging immediately. After everything calmed down, 2 items had appeared on the altar at some point in time. As for the door with all kinds of strange symbols, it was gone. Alger was able to compose himself as he seriously thanked Mr. Fool. He finished the ritual according to the procedure before reaching out to pick up the 2 items. One of them was a piece of paper that had been neatly folded, while the other was a translucent jellyfish that had azure blue sea water in it. Alger inspected the latter and discovered that there were occasional vortexes formed by winds or occasional lightning streaks. And from time to time, he could hear a distant, moving voice sounding from it. "This voice sounds like a woman's from the looks of it." This characteristic's owner was a lady. Alger couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. This meant that it wasn't some quasi-high-ranking member of the Church of Storms that had been killed. The Church of Storms didn't have any female high-ranking members, quasi or not. Putting away the ocean songsters beyond the characteristic, Alger unfolded the piece of paper. He swept past the main ingredient, and he quickly looked at the supplementary ingredients. Finally, his eyes paused at the ritual. To him, the main ingredients were unimportant with the beyond the characteristic in hand. He could look at it later. As for supplementary ingredients, they were rather easy to find, so they didn't need much attention. It was the ritual that was of utmost importance. Drink the potion in Obninsk's belly. Alger silently read the ritual's contents as the corresponding information quickly surfaced in his mind. Obninsks were ancient sea monsters. They could directly devour a sailboat, and it had a humongous, distorted body. It had as many as 3 heads and many tentacles that entangled with each other. They were the protagonists in many legends at sea. Most of these sea monsters were tamed by the Church of Storms. They had a fixed region of activity, but it was unknown if they had near human intelligence. It's no wonder the Church controls Obninsks, and not other sea monsters. It's no wonder there are so many Beyonders in the Sailor Pathway among pirates, but only a few can reach Sequence 5. Either they directly inherited it, or they're the subordinates of King of the Five Seas or Queen Mystic. Then, where should I find Obninsks that don't belong to the Church? Alger frowned slightly as he contemplated his advancement that bypassed the Church of Storms. His first reaction was to find Queen Mystic Benedek through Admiral of Stars Caplia. From her, he could find Obninsks that didn't belong to the Church of Storms. His second reaction was that it exposed himself to danger. This was because the corresponding of Minsks were likely servants of Queen Mystic, and they would report everything to their mistress. Yes, this will be the last resort if there aren't any other choices. Alger's thoughts raced as he quickly had another idea. That was to pray to Mr. Fool. This awakened existence secretly wielded the former authority of sea god called Virtue. He could commandeer undersea creatures, allowing him to know where to find the Minsks that didn't belong to any faction. There's no need to rush it. If I were to advance now, I won't be able to hide the advancement from others because of my lack of control over the spirituality dissipation. I can perform the prayer after I make my report and leave Parju Island now you calm down and memorized the ocean song's formula. Then, he moved the piece of paper to the tip of the candle's flame. As he watched the flame devour the formula at an increasing speed, Alger's gaze turned deep. After finishing off the remnant traces, his gaze landed on a sea map and locked onto a location. Banzi. Alger had planned on making a trip to Banzi and passing while en route to Parju Island. He wanted to know what the present state of the harbour was. He had already shared his thoughts with his sailors, and no one objected. This was because they were equally curious as to why Banzi harbour was suddenly destroyed. They were curious what it had turned into.